Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to webinar, the NEXTschool Initiative, Rethinking the High School Learning Model. I'm Anita Loisio, Research Associate at the Quebec English-Speaking Community Research Network at Concordia University, and I will be the host of today's event. Established in 2008, QUESCREN, the Quebec English-Speaking Communities Research Network, is a collaborative network of researchers, stakeholders, and educational and other institutions that improves understanding of Quebec's English-speaking communities and promotes their vitality. Just a couple of technical reminders before we begin. Please remember to keep your microphones muted during the event. If you have any technical difficulties, you can write a message in the chat and we will address the issue as best we can. And we are recording the session today. The presentation will be in English with subtitles translated into French. Pour les sous-titres en français, veuillez choisir le bouton Show Captions en bas à droite de votre écran. À côté de l'icône Show Captions, cliquez sur l'icône de la flèche vers le haut. Et pour le Speaking Language, sélectionnez English. Et pour l'option Translation, sélectionnez French. Cliquez sur Save. Pour la traduction vers le français, veuillez choisir le bouton Langue. Before continuing, I would like to acknowledge that while we meet today on a virtual platform, Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Ganyan-Gahaga Nation is recognized as the custodian of these lands and waters. Tiohtià:ke, Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today, it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. Education, which is home to a diverse education, which is one of the topics of today's event, has, of course, a major role to play in fostering a nuanced knowledge and understanding of the past, as well as ways of encouraging diversity and inclusion in the present. I encourage all of us, educators, researchers, and educational professionals more broadly, to reflect on the ways in which we can work in collaboration with Indigenous communities to form mutual and ongoing relationships that respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future. I'm happy to announce that today's event is the first live event as part of a new project QUESCREN is undertaking entitled ILET Impact. ILET, or the Interlevel Educational Table, was founded by QUESCREN in 2017 with the mission to support the English language education ecosystem in the province through research, knowledge mobilization, and educational activities. With the ILET Impact Project, we would like to amplify that mission by providing more opportunities for the dissemination of research and knowledge on English education in Quebec. The ILET Impact Project, as well as this event, is made possible through the financial support of the Department of Canadian Heritage. QUESCREN receives funding from the Secrétariat aux relations avec les Québécois d'expression anglaise, the Canadian Institute for Research on Linguistic Minorities, and Concordia University. Please note that this is a space for intellectual exchange. Any views or opinions expressed in this talk do not necessarily represent those of QUESCREN or its funders. And now I'd like to introduce one of our moderators, Vanessa Gold, who holds an MA in Educational Leadership. Vanessa is a doctoral candidate in the Department of Integrated Studies of Education at McGill University, studying pedagogical change processes in secondary schools. The research areas informing her work include student voice, educational leadership, design thinking, and action research. On the NEXTschool research team, she supports student voice projects at participating NEXTschools. And now I invite you, Vanessa, to introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Anita. Thank you, QUESCREN and ILET, for organizing this event. Here to speak to you today are Noel Burke, who is spearheading the NEXTschool initiative, Dr. Lisa Starr, the principal investigator of McGill's research team following the NEXTschool initiative, Sandy Grant and Felicia LeBlanc, NEXTschool participants currently piloting project at Howard S. Billings High School, and Dr. Aron Rosenberg, also on the McGill research team, who will moderate the session along with myself. I now invite Noel Burke to provide an overview of the Next School initiative.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you for the invitation to make a brief presentation of work that's been going on for the last 6 years and finally coming to fruition this fall at Billings High School in Chateauguay. Yeah, so the model we developed, without going in through this whole slide, is just to call your attention to the bottom 3 headings there. What students are looking for in an engaging high school environment are flexibility in time and space for their learning, a sense of belonging where they feel safe and secure in the learning environment and are supported both by peers and adults, and thirdly, relevance in the curriculum itself. So we employed over those 5 years that we've been looking at this, a variety of design sessions using this model from Stanford University with, as I've just said before, without the slide, a variety of stakeholders in education, particularly students, parents, administrators, teachers, and others, and developed a model that is adaptable as well to a variety of programs. So it's very clear that Next School is not a program of studies, but a framework for the support of existing programs. You have examples of many programs here, and many of the most innovative programs call for significant flexibility in time and space. You have the typical examples: International Baccalaureate, Sport Études, STEAM programs, art programs, deeper learning, the maker movement, etc. The primary time and space model brought us to study schools, in particular in New Zealand, where we saw a very interesting model. And I'm just going to point out the main features of this. A daily planning session with teachers when they arrive in the morning as a teaching team, followed by a daily student check-in and plan, followed by core instruction, core learning. And in this school in New Zealand, they refer to it as intake. Students intake and develop knowledge. And at the end of each day, every afternoon, they have applied learning where they have outputs. So they actually apply knowledge that they've learned in the core learning. So that's a model that, and you can see by the content of the curriculum that there aren't all the typical traditional discipline areas. And so that in our feedback with stakeholders was too far a gap to bridge right from the get-go. And so we've developed a different model that incorporates these 3 main features that we have found to be common among very innovative learning environments. And those have become the key elements of the Next School environment. First, what we call a learning hub is a daily 20-minute check-in to set the stage for the day ahead. So students meet in a small group, approximately 15 or so students, with a teacher coach who follows their development both academically and personally through their high school years. In this case of this project, starting in the fall, middle school years, followed by, at the end of each day, a daily hour of co-curricular courses that are both academic and interest. So they could be tutorials for makeup, they could be enhancement, they could be community visits, community site and service. And that's the last hour of every day. And the third key element is teacher flex time, where we've been able to develop a teacher schedule where every third day, teachers in small teams can actually collaboration, that's a spell check. Collaboration is the word for collaboration of teacher teams. Colorized video. Collaboration of teacher teams. So small teams of teachers teach for 2 days and then have a day of collaboration work where they can do case studies, where they can develop and plan curriculum, whether they can do follow-up work with students that they share. So the group of students is about 180 students. The group of teachers is 12 teachers. And therefore, within that confines of the school within a school, all of those teachers know all of those students. And this is where that strong sense of belonging comes from. So what we found in these innovative schools, just to summarize, for students, an increased sense of autonomy, self-confidence, a sense of relevance in learning, personalized study, and most importantly, that sense of belonging. For teachers, the main advantages have been adaptive learning environments, variable class sizes, because we have this school within a school. That group of teachers can mix and match the groups of students as they need, particularly in the student flex time, flexible scheduling, the ability to case conference about students rather than a student having a difficulty in one class and never being able to communicate that in the next class of the day or the one that follows. And sometimes a bad start to a day makes a bad day all around. And the ability to collaborate and plan as a team. So that's a very quick summary of 6 years of work. And we would summarize it, I think, our current mantra is personalized learning and professionalized teaching. And if you want more information about NEXTschool, please, it's very simple web link, nextschoolquebec.com will take you right there. There are a series of research briefs on the various elements of NEXTschool. There's a wonderful signature tune that appears at the beginning of the website. You'll see the connections to the research team and lots of other good stuff. So if you're interested in follow-up, certainly that's the place to go, nextschoolquebec.com. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Noel. At this point, since you mentioned the website, it's a good idea to also plug our podcast that follows the NEXTschool initiative called Change Ed. So if you're interested in following along there, please check it out. So next, I'd like to invite Dr. Lisa Starr, who's the principal investigator of McGill's research team following the NEXTschool initiative. She'll make connections between theory and the actual implementation of the concept.
Thanks, Vanessa. I don't know if we need the shared slides on the screen now, or if you want to continue to highlight those, that's up to you. So thank you everyone for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to not only be here with the team, but also to be here with all of you. Largely, the role that McGill has been playing is documenting the process of the NEXTschool initiative and how it's unfolded, largely under the umbrella of how teachers and schools engage in educational change, with attention to how the design thinking cycle also influences how people are able to implement the type of change that we're talking about. Noel touched on a few key points that we've been able to confirm in literature around the importance of student engagement. Often we conceive of student success in terms of grading, in terms of retention, advancement, failure rates, things like that as the way to measure student success. But we found that students are typically quite successful, particularly in the English sector, yet the levels of engagement that they express in the different surveys, one of which Noel referred to, is excessively low. And so we wanted to know a little bit more about that. And so in addition to documenting the process, we're also very keen on better understanding how students conceive of themselves as engaged in schooling and what that looks like to them. What is the experience of schooling to them, and where are the points where perhaps they don't feel as though their voice is as actively heard as it could or should be? And then how that information can be fed back into the engagement in this change process. We know that educational change happens in schools in a variety of different ways, and we've seen many different initiatives both succeed and fail at various junctures. So we're particularly interested not so much in judging whether or not it's successful or isn't, but what is the process? And so we are hoping that by studying that and being able to share that information with yourselves and people like you, that people who are interested in this type of initiative, as well as others, have the information that they need in order to avoid some of the pitfalls that may serve as obstacles for educational change, and maybe capitalize on the successes or be able to replicate some of the successes that we're seeing in the schools that we've been working with.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I'd like to invite Sandy Grant, the teacher at Howard S. Billings High School, to explain how NEXTschool is being implemented and she'll present the Student Flex and Hub.
Thank you, Vanessa. So if we go into our next slide, Noel. So one of the things, our main starter point that we were discussing, Felicia and I, was why is change needed? So we started off with discussing our main kicker for launching NEXTschool here at Howard S. Billings was why are we starting with NEXTschool here at Billings? And I've often done an LES, a project with my students, a learning and evaluation situation, where we looked at the inquiry question, what is the purpose of school? So to launch this LES, I would have my students create and design their dream school. And every one of them would create a school where they had their own learning space. And the teachers were just simply the guides. I would then ask them, what was the change needed to occur? And we would look at the video by Prince E, I Just Sued the School System. So if Noel, if you could start the video, this is something that we would look at to start our discussion. I don't think the volume is on.
You'll need to unshare your screen, reshare it with clicking the little button at the bottom saying share volume. Noel, you'll have to just stop sharing your screen and then reopen up the share screen. But before clicking proceed, there's a little box at the bottom that says share with volume.
Albert Einstein once said, everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, today on trial we have modern day schooling. Glad you could come. Not only does he make fish climb trees, but also makes them climb down and do a 10-mile run. Tell me, school, are you proud of the things you've done? Turning millions of people into robots, do you find that fun? Do you realize how many kids relate to that fish? Swimming upstream in class, never finding their gifts, thinking they are stupid, believing they are useless? Well, the time has come, no more excuses. I call school to the stand and accuse him of killing creativity, individuality, and being intellectually abusive. He's an ancient institution that has outlived his usage. So, Your Honor, this concludes my opening statement, and if I may present the evidence of my case, I will prove it. Proceed. Exhibit A. Here's a modern day phone. Recognize it? Here's a phone from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Stay with me. Here's a car from today, and here's a car from 150 years ago. Big difference, right? Well, get this. Here's a classroom of today, and here's a class we used 150 years ago. Now, ain't that a shame? In literally more than a century, nothing has changed. Yet you claim to prepare students for the future? But with evidence like that, I must ask, do you prepare students for the future or the past? I did a background check on you and let the record show that you were made to train people to work in factories, which explains why you put students in straight rows, nice and neat, tell them sit still, raise your hand if you want to speak, give them a short break to eat, and for 8 hours a day, tell them what to think. Oh, and make them compete to get an A. a letter which determines product quality, hence grade A of meat. I get it. Back then, times were different. We all have a past. I myself am no Gandhi. But today, we don't need to make robot zombies. The world has progressed. And now we need people who think creatively, innovatively, critically, independently, with the ability to connect. See, every scientist will tell you that no two brains are the same. And every parent with 2 or more children will confirm that claim. So please explain why you treat students like cookie cutter frames or snapback hats, giving them this one-size-fits-all crap.
Watch your language.
Sorry, Your Honor, but if a doctor prescribed the exact same medicine to all of his patients, the results will be tragic. So many people would get sick, yet when it comes to school, this is exactly what happens, this educational malpractice, where one teacher stands in front of 20 kids, each one having different strengths, different needs, different gifts, different dreams, and you teach the same thing the same way? That's horrific.
So as you can see from the video, it would definitely stir up some discussions with my students, and we would talk about what changes are needed within the school system. And from there, we would continue the
Ladies and
dialogue. We would continue the dialogue as to what changes need to occur within our school systems.
Why people are choosing this $139 drug.
What changes are needed in order for their dream schools to occur, to make the changes within the school system. And Noel, if you want to move on to the next slide, thank you so much. So one of the things that we were looking at, and Noel discussed at the beginning, was learning hubs. So this is something that we're looking at and implementing in the first 15 minutes of every day, that we would have our core groups, not our core groups, but about 15 students to discuss with them to start off their day with a weekly outcome. So something like Mondays, on Mondays, we would start off with Moody Mondays. So setting the pace for the week ahead, doing some emotional check-ins. We talked about maybe doing something like a Talk About Tuesdays, where we'll explore current events, maybe looking at news stories or any burning questions. And then a Wellness Wednesday, where we could have some meditation maybe, or talk about nutrition. And then Thoughtful Thursdays, where they could choose some priorities, maybe some school startups, looking at class rules. So these are just some activities that we're looking at, and then some fun Fridays, some activities that could possibly change, but these were some of the things that we want to kick off every day for the first 15 minutes of the day. If you can move on to the next slide. The other thing that Noel was mentioning was the student flex time. So that's at the end of the day, so the last hour of every day. We were talking about implementing our student flex time. So one of the student flex times that we were looking at was having an English resource. That would be just an example. So there would be like a math resource or an English resource. So this would be a catch-up time for our students that are struggling. So we could have something that I would be working on with my students. Being an English teacher, I would work on maybe fluency, comprehension, writing skills, test taking skills, response writing. And this is something that we discussed with my team, was that how would I know which students would require the English resources? I could do it during the first few weeks of school. We could use that flex time where we're still establishing our groups, where we could possibly test our reading scores. And then that's how I could determine which students might require English resource. So that would be the first one of the English resource ones. And the next one is when we have them select their flex times. We could look at offering something like, for example, film study, which will be QEP driven. some of the things that we would be looking at are camera angles, size of shot, framing, movement, lighting, sound and music. This is also, because it's QEP driven, it looks at media and production analysis. It also covers one of our CCCs, which is critical thinking. So I am still sticking within my QEP. I am still covering everything I need to cover within my domain. Next slide. Teacher flex time. So those are those days that Noel was talking about, where I have my time where I'm working with my days where I'm working with my teaching team. This is something super new and exciting for us that we've never had before. I'm really looking forward to it. And it gives me more time to work with my teachers. I get to discuss students that are in need, and eventually get to work towards my cross-curricular planning and student-led projects, and also inquiry-based question planning, which is so amazing. I can't wait to be doing this with my team. So it's more team building and team planning and more teacher time. I find right now where I'm just running around and just, you know, crossing time with my teachers, and I don't really get time to really sit down and talk and really team build. Well, now it's actually going to be in my schedule, which is really amazing and something that I'm really looking forward to. And Felicia.
Thank you so much, Sandy. We're gonna talk to Felicia LeBlanc now, and she's gonna speak about the administrative expectations to support NEXTschool.
So my stuff is a lot less exciting than Sandy's, which is, you know, more hands-on and more about the students. Mine is a little drier, but so from an administrative standpoint, we've worked for many years, luckily with the support of Noel, and certainly more recently with the support of the McGill team, looking at, you know, long-term, how are we going to bring about this change at Billings? That was something that we, as a team, there are 3 administrators in this school. We worked to try and figure out how this model would work in our environment and how we felt it would be appropriate, but also sustainable. So Noel, we were very grateful. He was, you know, very open to that, you know, really explained to us why certain things, certain elements of the model were critical, but also flexible enough that we could look and see how we could work it ourselves. So that was something that we definitely worked on as a NIN team before we even brought it to the teachers. And again, I've just mentioned a couple of things here. Obviously, change management is a big thing in our, you know, a big issue at the forefront of all of this, because some of this is very new and very different. I don't know if it goes as far as Prince E would like us all to go, but certainly we're going in a direction where it is much more innovative and much more responsive, hopefully to teacher and ultimately student needs. So we looked at all of that. School organization has been a big part of that, obviously. So scheduling and timetabling. I know there's a question, I believe it was John who asked a question about why are the teachers off every 3rd day? Well, this is something that we found worked for us. So because we are focusing middle school at Billings, we're doing our next initiative in the middle school at Billings. So grade 7 and 8, it affects 8 classes, 8 groups of students, 4 grade 7s, 4 grade 8s is the model we're working with. And that allowed us to work with 12 teachers. So it's a group of 12 teachers that are covering all of that. And they're divided into 3 groups. So the 12 are divided into 3. If I had known this question would come up, I might have made a different slide. But so we have a group of grade 7 core teachers, a group of grade 8 core teachers, and then we have what we call the complementary group. And so because they're divided into 3, they each get 1 day off every 3 days to work collectively. So that's why it's every 3 days. So when those teachers are off, obviously the other group is stepping in to teach the students. So I wanted to address that question. So we looked at a bunch of different models and trying to figure out one that would work. We've landed on one. Noel spoke to it quickly. We have a 5-day schedule here, or 5-period day, 9-day schedule. What we've done is we've devoted the last period of the day to be student flex. So the student traditional classes, let's call it subject time allocation, has been condensed to a certain extent into periods 1 through 4. And the reason I say condensed is it's a bit of a misnomer. Obviously, we didn't remove 1/5 of the time because, as Sandy alluded to, there still will be lots of English learning, and specifically, based on the QEP, that will be happening in Student Flex. It's just more, we're looking more at interventions, so remediation and enrichment, and then also student choice. So that's something that we're looking. And then, so again, I talked about modification of subject time. We looked at implications to staffing. One of the things that was a big concern to us is that we didn't want to start with this group of 12 teachers, and then next year, because of a shift in numbers of groups, have to do something different with those teachers, remove some of them, or now have some of them teach out of the middle school, which was a big priority for us as admin. We wanted to try and keep a consistent group and a consistent plan. So we had to work with the school board to get them to agree to give us adequate staffing. I wanted 5 years. I think in the end it got pushed to 3, but in my mind it's still 5, so I'll hold them to that. And also support staff, how we're going to use our support staff, specifically, our special ed team. How are we going to use them differently now? So that's been a big conversation about, do we use them differently in the middle school now? What does that mean for the senior school and the other parts of the school? Change of daily schedule. Part of the model is the hub. So we wanted to bring in we brought in a 20-minute hub. Noel was very clear that was kind of the minimum. Ideally it was 30, but we felt we couldn't do 30 right now. We've landed on 20. And that has implications for whole school. So we are still very much engaged in that. To be perfectly honest, we put out what we thought was the administration put out a communication to whole staff that we thought was clear. They have given us back the feedback that we weren't clear, and it was, so we're still in the process of working on getting the rest of the team on board with this schedule change. We'll get there, but we just have to keep working and keep listening and keep tweaking and responding. The reorganization of building layout is, again, not very sexy, but we are looking to try and create a set section of the school for the middle school, so the teachers obviously will increase the teamwork, the team aspect, and also for the students to be all in one section. The teachers can talk to each other quickly. So that's requiring a big change in the school. Currently in our school, we have subject wings. So we're having to shift quite a few people. And we all know how much teachers love to change classrooms. So that's something we've been working on. And then the teaching team has been, obviously, for me, probably the most exciting piece, working to get the team excited. So obviously there's a big emphasis on shared decision making with the team. So initially the way we approach this is working again with Noel and the McGill team. There were introductory workshops where elements of the model were presented. That was an open invite. All teachers could show up. And there was quite a bit of interest initially for a bunch of different reasons, as you can imagine. And then eventually the teachers that were interested were asked to submit letters of intent. We were very happy to get more than we needed, which is, obviously that's very exciting, but also was very difficult as administrators to navigate, because obviously some people were not given what they wanted. So we had a lot of disappointed teachers too. So we had to navigate that. And then finally, the selection of the teaching team. Again, it's not even a fully staffed team. We still have some openings for a variety of reasons. But there is a core team that has been working for many months now on, solidifying their vision and moving forward with that. So Noel, my next slide, please. Which will be a shorter slide. So for us, I spoke to my colleagues, the other administrators, what are big observations so far, what are big kind of takeaways, but things we're excited about. The involvement of McGill and the McGill team has been, I think, instrumental in validating the work that the teachers are doing. It's also increased trust, because nobody wants to, let's be honest, nobody wants to waste McGill's time. There's very busy people. you know, and so that's increased trust, but also there's a level of knowledge and you know, research-based approaches that we can tap into, and they have been so supportive. And so for us, that's made all the difference, especially as administrators, and observing the teaching team work with them. We notice that that's been critical for the process so far for us. We're really, the emphasis on the shared decision making, I call it, you know, flipping the script. That's something that hasn't always been, you know, easy to navigate, but it's something that we are very committed to doing, and really trying to empower the teachers to drive the program, so that obviously if they have a vested interest, they're more motivated, they're more excited, they have more control. But again, I won't say it's been, you know, without any kind of challenge. Of course it has. We've, you know, there's certain things that, you know, we're trying to navigate when the teachers don't agree, because then they're very quick to come to the admin who need to try and, you know, so that's been interesting, but we are committed to it, and we've enjoyed the process of doing this with all its challenges. And again, finally, you know, the commitment of the teaching team, we've just been blown away. The teachers who have come on board, they're so willing to give up their time, put in the effort, they're motivated, they're engaged. It's so much fun to watch them. And, you know, just yesterday I was chatting with almost all of them in the staff room, and, you know, we want to have more, we want to have regular check-ins. So we've set up a whole bunch of, you know, till the end of the year. So even in the middle of teachers exhausted and, you know, looking at the end of June, they're still asking for more. We want to be talking, we want to be asking questions, we want to have access to the admin. So that's been great. So that just happened yesterday. So they've been really, yeah, it's been amazing to watch them. I'm very excited and motivated. I'm excited for them, and I'm very motivated to support them based on that. And then the last thing, and I only put it at the end, not because it's the least important, but because it's something that's more of a personal thing for me. I really am appreciating the emphasis on student voice in all of this. I think it's critical to, as Noel started way back, you know, way back at the beginning of this whole thing, student engagement. They're not engaged, and listening to them and giving them a voice, and hopefully being able to react and address the things that they're telling us is going to be, you know, that's a personal thing that I'm excited about. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Felicia. And I'm glad you ended on the emphasis of student voice, because our next speaker, Vanessa Gold, will be chatting a little bit about student voice and how it's part of the NEXTschool project. Take it away, Vanessa.
Thanks, Aron. So through the lens of student voice research, student involvement in school reform can be defined as, quote, youth sharing their opinions of problems and potential solutions, collaborating with adults to actually address the problems in their school. That's from Dana Mitra, 2004. We know that involving students in school change is important. Some benefits include improving student engagement, like we've talked about, student agency, skill building, and relationships with teachers. Unfortunately, students are rarely involved in educational change efforts, which has increasingly been considered a cause of reform failure. Part of what sets NEXTschool apart from other school change initiatives is that it intentionally includes student involvement as part of its change process. So one way we go about doing this is with a method called photo voice, which is something our research team has done with several schools to facilitate student involvement. Photo voice is a research method that asks students to respond to some guiding questions using photos. A couple of examples of guiding questions in the context of NEXTschool are, what is the best part of your school day? Or what should we be thinking about in order to make school better for you? Or what does engagement look or feel like to you? Or how can your school better engage you? So after being given these kinds of prompts, students go around their school or their school community and take photographs that help them capture and explain their perspectives in response to these guiding questions. So students' photo responses to these questions are shared in an exhibition, which in our cases has looked like a series of large printed panels with student photos, their captions, and a curatorial statement which describes their whole process. In the context of NEXTschool, photo voice is particularly helpful at representing student experiences to the adults responsible for their experiences of schooling. This is important because adults don't always have the most accurate conceptualizations of students' lived experiences. We found that adults looking at photo voice exhibitions are often surprised by what students share. Student experiences and insights can support change makers by providing them insider knowledge of what the experience of education is like for them in a particular classroom, school, or community. So if we're going to try and change schools for the better, including the largest user group of educational institutions, and arguably the group schools are designed to serve, is essential. Thanks, Aron.
Awesome. So we've reached that point in the event where we're now opening the floor for questions from anyone who might have some. We also have some questions we prepared ahead of time, but I think we'll start with some from the audience. So we have a couple of questions from John Fulton, and these are for Felicia and for Noel, and they're about the structure of the school day at a NEXTschool. So John first was asking the one that Felicia touched on about the question about why are the teacher flex days every third day? And Felicia answered that, but maybe Noel might want to chat a little bit more about how that factors into legislative teaching times. And then the other part of John's question is about the 30-minute hubs. And he was curious about why are they 20 minutes and not 30 minutes, and what was some of the thinking around that. So maybe I'll put it to Noel first.
Yeah, sure. I'll leave the 20 minutes to Felicia. It's a big struggle at the moment. The every third day, and I just want to be clear, it's not off, it's collaborative time. It's not pure teaching time in the collective agreement, but it's collaborative time. And it was actually a simple discovery we made when we were exploring different formats of scheduling, and realized that teachers teach about 2/3 of the students' annual time. Student annual time is 900 hours. Teachers teach a little over 600 pure teaching. And it made us realize that all these spare periods that are usually scattered over a random schedule could actually be realigned all together and when they are accumulated and realigned, they form a third of the school year. And so that's where we've got the breakdown of every third day for collaboration time. There's also a student flex period at the end of that day. So teachers actually have 4 out of the 5 periods off every third day. And that's in full compliance with the collective agreement. The other thing I would mention, because it was mentioned student flex time, I think Felicia was starting to answer a question about that. The basic school regulation in Quebec actually does not call for 900 hours of instruction. It calls for a minimum of 720, which is 80% of the student year. And so that hour a day is the 20% outside of the 80, some of which will be used for subject disciplinary instruction when and if necessary with certain students and not for everyone. Thanks.
Thanks, Noel. And Felicia, would you like to chat a little bit more about the 30-minute, 20-minute flex periods?
Sure. Yeah. Just if people are interested, what Noel alluded to. So the way and as teachers load right now will look like in the middle school is, so again, a 5-period day. So one day they teach 5 periods, one day they teach 4. And then one day they are on flex, but on the flex day, they have to also be available for student flex at the end of the day. And they have student flex on the day they teach 4 as well. So anyways, it's just exactly as Noel says, it's a reorganization of teacher time. The 30 minutes as opposed to, so 30 again would have been the ideal, but for us, we had to work with, I mean, it comes down to logistics. We had to work with transport. What could we do with buses? And then obviously already by doing the 20, which by the way, we got nowhere. There's very little flexibility in transport for us. So we couldn't really move the start or end of day on either end. And so then we, again, because we wanted to carve out the 20 minutes, we actually are looking to take away some time from recess, what is currently our recess and what is currently our lunch hour to carve out the 20 minutes. So that's why we didn't go for 30. Already, as Noel alluded, that has been a challenge. And again, to say that it wasn't a discussion in the staff room with me this morning would be lying, because it was. I have teachers still saying, we don't want it. This is the senior teachers, you know, we don't want this. Why are you making us do this? Okay, so obviously the middle school teachers are on board. They're excited and they bought into this. They understand the value and what it will mean to them and their reality if the senior teachers are, even in May, still requiring some convincing, let's put it that way.
Felicia, while you're there, we
Yeah.
have a question about telling us more about Billings location,
Yes,
socioeconomic
yeah.
status. Would you jump into that for a little bit?
Absolutely. Okay, so Billings we're located in Chateauguay, which is on the south shore of Montreal. It is, in terms of the school, we're about 860 students, grades 7 to 11, 860. In terms of socioeconomic, I don't know if you're familiar with the NANS ranking, so I'll use that to maybe give an idea. So the NANS rankings rank schools from highest level of this is based on the census, highest level of socioeconomic would be a 1, a 10 would be lowest socioeconomic status for a school. So a school with a lot of students who need support, for instance. So Billings is a 7. So I don't know if that gives you an idea, but yeah, we're about a 7. So a lot of middle-class families, we've, but obviously other, very wealthy families, and then families who are not. And then the makeup of the school, the most interesting groups that we have, student groups, is we have about 30% of our student population is Indigenous. Chateauguay is located right beside Ganawage, which is a Mohawk community. So 30% of the schools is Indigenous, mostly Mohawk, obviously. And then about 25% of our students are also Black African-American. They identify differently. And then the rest of the school, 50%. In terms of special needs, I'm going to say approximately a third of the student body has an IEP. So, individual education plans, about a third. So that, I don't know if that gives you an idea. Number of students, 860 approximately. We do run an IB program, which is more marketed and targets more an enriched classroom setting. And then there we have what we call the regular, for everybody. We have learning centers as well, which are self-contained special needs classrooms for students with high needs. So we actually have 3, we're going up to 4 next year. We run a WOTP program for senior students who are working towards certification as opposed to graduation. I don't know. I don't know if that gives enough information, but yeah, that's basically our school in a nutshell.
And just quickly, someone's wondering how long this program's been happening at Billings, or when did you first get introduced to it?
Oh, so so the next program, the middle school it's not currently running. It will run. We're on track to start it in September 2023. So the coming academic year, we have been working. I'm going to say Noel came knocking on our door. Noel, 2 years or 3 years? It might be 3 years ago, Noel. Yeah, 3 years ago. So
2 years for NEXTschool 2.0 and 6 years for NEXTschool 1.0.
Sure. Okay. So, but Noel came knocking on our door saying, "Hey, are you on board?" So there was a year of, exploration, figuring it out. Certainly this year was the intense year in terms of prep, planning, and mobilizing to prepare ourselves. But yeah, so and the teachers were brought on board. It was more an admin, school board, Noel thing up until this year. And then this year it was full staff was started to come on board and learn about the program. And then we've been mobilizing ever since.
That's a great connection to the focus of this next question on teachers. Tracy Rosen writes, do you think that the increased teacher commitment you observed is also a result of increased teacher voice, much like how increased student voice results in increased student motivation? Have you explored this connection? So I would love to put this one to Sandy, maybe Lisa, if she has anything to say, and then Felicia or Noel, if you want to add, you're welcome to as well. So Sandy, do you feel like having this participatory role in this project, has it increased your motivation?
100%. No, not at all. 100%. But I was on board probably, how long has it been, Noel? Probably 6 years ago, 5 years ago. I was already on board 6 years ago. When we first talked about this. So I'm really happy that it's back now. And I feel 100% more charged in my teaching. I've been teaching for over 20 years. So I'm really excited to get this rolling. Especially that I've been doing this LES with my students for a couple of years now, and to finally be able to say to a new group of kids that, hey, you know what, you have your dream school, and now let's put this into practice. So it's motivating, and to have such a wonderful team of teachers to be able to work with, and to be able to work with Felicia alongside her, it's like a dream come true as a teacher. It's really exciting.
That's really nice to hear. Lisa, do you have any thoughts on the research side of things, whether the way that teachers are involved might impact their motivation?
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing, echoes, the same sentiment, is that the greater the amount of investment in the process of figuring out how NEXTschool can work in that particular context increases the motivation exponentially. And I think the key is the context. NEXTschool has never been intended to be a kind of a one-size-fits-all type of reform. It's more intended to draw on some of the best research that we know about how students experience success in schools and how they engage in school, and to be able to provide a framework that can be customized to the needs of that particular context. So someone asked earlier in one of the questions to describe kind of the context of Billings. Well, that's not to say that another school in a completely different jurisdiction or with a student clientele couldn't also be able to customize some of the pieces so that it works for them. And I think that's a real key piece, is we're kind of providing a framework or a starting point, but the motivation from teachers really comes from being able to invest in that process to be able to tweak it so that it works not only for them, but for the students that they are caring for.
Thanks, Lisa. Are there any other thoughts on this one from Felicia or Noel before we move on?
Yeah, I think one of the big differences, I did mention there was a NEXTschool 1.0 and a 2.0, and the big difference in 1.0 is that we designed the structures and the framework, etc., and introduced it to the teaching staff, thinking that, well, they're used to this kind of approach to professional development and innovation, where somebody would come in and say, look, here's 5 steps and you've worked a miracle. It didn't work at all. And I had the most exciting day of my career last November. We did a design workshop at Billings, and in which teachers designed and actually were empowered to design and develop what the school looked like. We use the analogy of container and content. So the container is the collective agreement, the basic school regulation, the Education Act, the Quebec Education Program. But within that, the flexibility and the customization that Lisa has mentioned was all up to the teachers. And the design process that I described earlier constantly is iterative. So the prototypes, and now we get the teachers using that language. Here's my 3rd version of what I was thinking about, right? As opposed to, oh, I've got the right answer and we're done. So teachers as designers has really liberated them. And that's when the excitement that Sandy expressed a few moments ago just took fire in the room, and people, you couldn't stop them. So I think that's the essential difference, both in the current success of the project development and in the engagement of teachers, is teachers know best. They're the ones that should be doing the design work, not people like me and and people from outside. So I think that was a real breakthrough for us and for the teaching team. Thanks.
Any other responses to that before we move on? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just and Sandy can disagree with me if she thinks I'm wrong, but I also think it's the innovation that's exciting for teachers, and again, the video we saw, not a lot changes in schools. So if you're like Sandy or someone like me and you've been doing this for 2 decades, you get good at it, and you can get, dare I say, a little bored with it. And so I think we have a lot of experienced teachers on the team who've been at this for a little bit. And so the idea to be able to do something new and something out of the box, you know, I mean, I want you to understand the excitement about Talk About It Tuesdays using the word taco in it. They were so excited. They were like just giggling and, you know, but just working together, that's a big thing. We know obviously the teamwork is motivating, especially if you're pulling in the same direction, which currently the team generally really is. They are really pulling in the same direction. So they're excited and bouncing ideas off each other and giggling. They have a messenger chat or group chat where they tell each other, send each other stuff at night. Okay, so they're very excited. But I think the innovation too, the ability to change that, you know, change things. What could we do differently? Could we engage the kids differently? And I'm also going to say, as someone who's, I've been in education for a long time, and certainly now sitting in a different viewpoint, the kids aren't becoming more engaged, if that makes sense. And COVID didn't increase engagement. In fact, it made it even more challenging. And so from my vantage point, I'm seeing teachers feeling really discouraged with the, you know, the kids aren't excited. How do we get them excited? How do we bring them back? Why aren't they even, I tried to do this cool thing. They're not interested. So they're desperate. The teachers are desperate too, to get the kids to be engaged and get excited too. So I think they're seeing the possibility of that here as well. So for themselves to be re-engaged with the excitement that is teaching, but also hopefully that they're going to have an impact on getting the kids engaged, and the kids will be excited and coming to class and, you know, building relationships with them. You know, there's a lot of potential for magic here, you know, and all the good that makes teaching amazing. So yeah, we have really high hopes, and yeah, we're very excited about where we're going.
Thanks so much, Felicia. So we've got another question from Avery Rube. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation. I think this is probably one for Noel. Is the schedule you're proposing here accepted by unions in the ministry? Are there other schedules that you looked at in your research that would not be accepted by the union and ministry? What are those requirements to be accepted by the union? Please expand, Noel.
Yeah, I think for the moment we're playing safe. As I mentioned, the BSR only requires 720 hours of instruction. In fact, in secondary 5, it requires only 624 hours of compulsory instruction. I think we're playing safe rather than poking the bear, and by the bear I mean the ministry, not the union. We did a presentation of NEXTschool 1.0 to the provincial union reps from all of the school boards, and received a very neutral response. It's clearly at a provincial level, the union is not going to come out excited about one approach or program than the other, but they certainly were not negative about it, and we haven't heard any rumblings at Billings. We're not exceeding any of the workloads, so that shouldn't be an issue. There's also a provision in the collective agreement, 8 point something, where a group of teachers who want to organize their schedule within the boundaries of the collective agreement can do so. And so that's our assumption. The other safeguard is that programs like Sportitude, Attitude are all functioning at like a 60% core instruction and 40% not even related. So the student flex time we have is still tied, as Sandy pointed out earlier, still tied. All the academic courses that are offered in student flex time are tied to academic competencies, and all of the interest courses like the film studies and a variety of other courses are tied to the cross-curricular competency and lifelong learning. We do have the advantage, if I take a moment to say, you know, we don't hear praise in our own backyard, but when we've traveled and spoken to people, very high profile people, Pasi Selberg, Peter Senge, Michael Fullen, who call the QEP, you know, top 3, top 5 curriculum designs worldwide. And so we're taking advantage of that curriculum reform, competency-based learning, and flexible approaches to teaching and learning. So we have not heard, you know, to summarize, big pushback, but even if there was pushback, we're still within the current boundaries and flexibilities that exist. A lot of people are not aware that the BSR is more flexible than they think, and that the collective agreement has flexibility. In fact, the current new collective agreement talks about annualizing teacher workload, and this is part of that, right? So because on these 9 days, if teachers teach 5 and 4 and 1 every third day in a cycle, they run the risk, if they add more teaching time on their off days, of exceeding some of the norms. So yeah, I think we're in safe territory and playing it safe within flexible boundaries. Long answer to a short question. Thanks.
Thanks, Noel. This next question is from Lorraine O'Donnell. Lorraine's wondering what the impact of gender might be on the way that different students, how they are impacted by the NEXTschool model that Billings is developing. And maybe I'll just make the question a little bit broader. And I know that NEXTschool really prides itself on trying to think about a student-centered approach to learning. So how does the identity of the student, maybe not just their gender, but other factors in the student's identity, how might it factor into what NEXTschool offers that's maybe different than the conventional approach to education? Anyone want to jump in on this one?
I'll kick off by saying that the Learning Hub and the essential notion of the Learning Hub is about relationship building and belonging. When we did NEXTschool 1.0, the Learning Hub was less, there was less emphasis on that, because at the time we were obsessing about how we could adapt the current structures of school. We were conscious that a relationship building was important, but it's become now right up in the forefront. And the fact that, 15 students meet with a teacher coach every morning to kick the day off and to say, I had a really rough night last night. I didn't get any of my homework done. I'm not ready for the test. And the teacher coach then has the ability to speak to, the other teachers, fire off a message to other teachers. Listen, Johnny's not up to it today. Maybe it's best just let him glide for the day, rather than Johnny having to explain or hide for the whole day from all the teachers. In terms of gender, most of the team is female at the moment. There are, I think, three males on the team.
No, it's pretty balanced, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's currently.
I'll let you go with it.
Well, I was going to speak to that, actually. Yeah, that when we, you don't always have the luxury of picking a team. I don't like the word picking, but kind of designing a team. And that's something we looked at for sure, balancing different, having all teachers representing as many different groups as possible. Did we get it perfect? No. But that was definitely in the forefront to make sure that we had a variety of different experiences and, reflected in the teaching group. I think Noel is 100% right. The opportunities of hub, but also just simply shrinking the Billings, I said 860 students. This is true, but it really is designed as a school to house over 3,000. It's a massive building. It's a very disjointed building, because it's actually 3 schools that were joined together. So it's a very interesting building. So by putting currently students, a 12-year-old student showing up here runs all over this building. And listen, they figure it out pretty quick, contrary to what their parents think will happen. They figure it out pretty quick and they find it. But putting them all in one area, giving them greater access to their teachers, creating that environment where the teachers know them, hopefully that will reach all our students. We often think about boys being even more disengaged than girls. Certainly one of the priorities coming from this ministry that they have us, it's a target at a school board level to increase graduation rates of boys. I think one of the current targets is something like 80-point-something% need to be graduating the boys, and at least in our school board, we're right in that zone. So we're right there. Sounds low, I know, but anyway, but yeah, so it's definitely a priority. It's on people's radars. We were looking to try and create as balanced a team, again, based on who was interested and based on who was on board, trying to keep that in mind, because you obviously, if you're focusing on social and emotional, if that's something that is part of the model, then having different teachers where kids can connect with a teacher, that's something we've talked about. We don't have a plan yet. What if a student really doesn't like the person they're in hub with? They don't connect with that teacher at all, but they really love teacher X. You know, how flexible are we going to be? What kind of system are we putting in place to be able to shift those kids and really have them be particularly in hub with an adult that will help them flourish. So anyway, but it's on our radar. We've discussed it. We've thrown it, as Sandy's nodding, we've thrown that around, and we're definitely going to look to work towards that for sure.
Can I,
Thanks,
can I just
ahead,
jump
Vanessa.
in on that? I think it's really important to recognize that what the possibility is for it to be, and I mentioned this earlier, is the context. And so, you know, there's a gendered piece, particularly when we're thinking about students, but there's a number of other points of inclusion that I think are important to consider as well. And so even when the conceptualizing gender identity and how that fits into it, and what the flexibility in the input, and I think this is true from both students and teachers, is it allows us to have these conversations and to challenge our thinking in ways that are more reflective of our student body. Sometimes the structure of schooling, there are things that we agree that are important, yet we don't always have a time to actually think through how do we act upon what we value. And so now we're starting to think about how we can create some actionable items that are that push ourselves in the direction of inclusivity in a way that perhaps we haven't had the space to think that through the way that we would like.
Yeah, I think that's so important especially with the focus on student voice, we get a lot more understanding of what the different students might be looking for. Any other thoughts on that question before we move to the next one? All right, Vanessa, you can ask the next one.
All right, we've got from Jennifer Cook. Are you working with community organizations to diversify and support you, as well as adding community expertise and perspective?
The quick answer is not yet. Not yet. That's definitely again on our radar, but it's not. We're not even crawling yet. Let me put it that way. You know, we're still, I don't even know if we've rolled over yet. So we're still very much ironing out much more simple details before to me, that's like, give us a chance to be toddlers before but yes, it is important, and it is on our radar to thank you. Who put that? Who was the lady? Vanessa? No, who?
Jennifer.
What did you say? Jennifer. Anyway, thank you for bringing that up. I think it's valuable and a great point. Yeah, it's on our radar, but no, not yet, but hopefully, yes, soon.
And I think, Noel, maybe in the development of NEXTschool, have you been working with community organizations?
Well, yes, and NEXTschool is actually an outcrop of the Community Learning Center project, which began in 2005. So I think when we're up on our feet and not just toddling, but actually walking quickly, there's the absolute opportunity to plug back into that network and learn, which is the host of the Community Learning Center, which has a lot of tentacles out in the community all over the province, and as well on the South Shore here in Montreal and the city of Montreal. I think that'll be an easy, an easier move than the school itself or the teachers trying to make these connections. All of those connections exist and lie in waiting.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Our next question is from Avery. Avery's wondering a little bit about assessment and how it might look in a NEXTschool model, maybe particularly at the Billings model, but Noel, you can talk more generally. Avery asks whether the report card would be traditional, like with subject areas and letter number grades, or would there be room for more competency or mastery based approach, a hybrid, something else? Maybe we can first hear from either Sandy and Felicia whether that's something they've thought about at Billings, and then Noel, you can chat more generally.
Sandy, jump in if you want, but so the report card in Quebec is mandated by the government. We don't have a ton of flexibility. Obviously, it is competency based already. So we are going to, if you think back to one of the earlier slides that Noel showed, where they looked at basically the daily schedule of the students, where it was the intake classes, so the classes where there was a lot of instruction, where they were learning, and then the outtake classes at the end of the day, where it was moving towards application and production. That's a dream, you know, that like, so he presented that to us and we were like, sure, that's amazing. But for teachers to be able to do that, you know, the levels of cross-curricular, being able to deliver cross-curricular and you know, all those things are, so we didn't feel like we wanted to jump. Again, we're barely rolling over yet, so we didn't want to jump on that. But that for sure is definitely out there as a goal. The report card, one of the things we've talked about one of the things we've talked about putting on the report card is what we're going to be doing in Student Flex. So for instance, adding, let's say Sandy's example where she did intro to film studies, the students will have that as a kind of an interest course. Obviously no credit, but we don't really focus on credits in middle school anyway. And we're leaning towards a comment feedback. So nothing graded, especially because it's interest, but just a comment. So the teachers will come up with a comment bank that they like and then give feedback. So that's, in terms of the report card, that is definitely something we've talked about. I hope that addresses it. Thanks.
Absolutely. Sandy, would you like to add anything?
So like I was mentioning in my presentation, like I was saying before, and like Felicia just mentioned, for the film analysis one, where our film study, I could use it towards my CCCs, which is something that I have to evaluate as a teacher. So no changes yet, but at least I have something that I could use for evaluational purposes, which helps us for teachers. So, yeah.
And CCC is cross-curricular competencies?
Exactly. Yeah, cross-curricular competencies.
Noel or Lisa, I know Lisa is a specialist or an expert in assessment. If you have anything to add about this conversation, or Noel about NEXTschool more generally.
Yeah, that's a dangerous door to open. I have fairly strong feelings about assessment, as many of you around the table know. I do think there is greater attention, and increasingly I think this is across the board in schools, about the importance of formative assessment, and NEXTschool allows space for that. In an ideal world, I think it would lead the charge away from standardized testing to be able to justify the merit of formative assessment in terms of student learning, and be able to show success in it as engagement increases. Either success also increases, or at the very least remains at the same height on a kind of a graph. And so I think it's important to kind of recognize that NEXTschool is a fairly innovative model, and alongside that becomes critical dialogue about what is the purpose of assessment. But that's not an easy conversation, because as was pointed out, it's not controlled by the teachers. This is what I'm saying to all of you, is things that many of you know already. When it's controlled by the ministry, sometimes it's the challenge is for us to find the spaces between what we know students really need in terms of their own learning and what the ministry requires of us to be able to kind of fill the gap in ways that benefit students the most.
Thank you. Noel, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think what we're trying to do is model, as Lisa's pointed out, more effective formative evaluation, focus on that, alternative modes of evaluation and assessment that might serve as models for deeper discussion about standardized matriculation exams, which everybody, including the ministry, is critical of, but can't seem to find their way out of that box. Although they've been decreasing the number that they create on their own. I think generally in the short term, again, not in the coming year, might be the notion of co-curricular credits. So the film course might get, because the whole Quebec curriculum is based on the model of 25 hours as a credit. And so to give kids credit for interest courses is important in two ways. One, we're not necessarily evaluating they get the credit or not. They basically participating in the full run of the course would be the credit they would receive. but more importantly, research tells us that when school values what kids are interested in, they start to value what school is interested in. So this balance in student flex time of interest courses and academic courses, we're still working on the better titles for that, is a balance that sort of gives student voice where it's appropriate, and student choice, more importantly. And that's, we have seen in many innovative environments, the secret to student engagement is student choice and student voice. Thanks.
Thanks, Noel. We have a follow-up question from Jennifer's question on working with organizations. Tracy wants to know, you mentioned 30% of the population is from Ganawage. Are you currently working on including Indigenous knowledge as well, specifically from Ganawage?
I'll speak to that. So thank you. We are very lucky right now. We actually have several consultants at the school board who are Mohawk. They're Indigenous consultants. So they live in the Ganawage community. And so we're working very closely with them, and they will work closely with the teachers again, and the beauty of the teacher flex time to be able to have teachers work with those, experts, those consultants for longer periods of time together as a team. So the possibilities there are, we already work with them, and they're all, I'm going to say they're in our school, won't say daily, but pretty darn close. So they're often here. We have the advantage of being attached to the school board, advantage and disadvantage, but that's a whole other conversation of being attached to the school board. And so they're often here. They, have free pass to walk around our school and, speak to students, speak to teachers. A lot of teachers have reached out to them. So yes, that is something that is ongoing. And I have no expectation that it would change or slow down within the middle school context next year or the next school context. We're on that. Momentum is only growing, so I expect that to continue to grow.
Thanks, Felicia.
And thanks for the question. So one last question we have here from Carol Meindl. Carol's asking, how is the NEXTschool model preparing students for CEGEP, given that the goalposts have shifted? So I know this is a big question about how the NEXTschool model might be preparing students for what they're going to be doing after high school, but maybe Noel, would you like to start us off on that one?
Yeah, sure. We've been in informal conversations with some CEGEP representatives, and the chair of the Association of English CEGEPs as well has had a very strong interest in the project and in those transitions. And one of the things that we explored a number of years back was a competency profile from the 25 competencies that form the QEP. Could they be used as entry requirements to CEGEP programs? So the best I can say is there's strong interest in it. They're very interested in students that are better at self-regulation and better at the types of tasks that they will face when entering CEGEP, and they see NEXTschool as an opportunity to build on that. So very early stages, but there's active interest in alternative, both alternative approaches to teaching and learning and alternative approaches to CEGEP admission. One of the biggest secrets is the changeover and dropout rate at CEGEP, because students are not clear at all about what their choices are. And so hopefully if we move on to senior grade levels with the NEXTschool project, things like career orientation and post-secondary studies preparation would become a bigger part, we would assume, of student flex time. So I think that's again early stages, but active interest from the CEGEP community.
And that was a very complicated answer to, and I would go so far as to say, if we can get middle school kids engaged and excited, half the battle's already won before they enter. So I would just go there. If we can get these kids to be like school, I'll stop there, like school, not hate coming to school, half the battle is already won before they move into the senior school. So yeah, and with the student flex time, to be able to target specific student needs in a meaningful, targeted way, the student is struggling with certain concepts or, even a certain subject, to be able to do that in a systematic, targeted way and hopefully continue to close gaps as they move through. Very powerful. So yeah, for us on a very, in our very, small environment here, that would be my answer, that if we can get them to the senior school and have closed some gaps, academic gaps, learning gaps, study, student skills, all of that, yeah, we're going to increase their success in the senior school and therefore post-secondary, whatever that looks like. So.
Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else want to address that one? All right, Vanessa, do you want to ask a couple of the questions we had prepared from beforehand?
Yeah, sure. Before we do that, just want to put it out to the audience. If you have any other last minute lingering questions, put them in the chat now and we'll get to them if we have time. So the first of the couple we're going to ask are, what are the major challenges that we face going forward or that we have experienced? I thought maybe Lisa and Noel might answer this first and then maybe pick it up from there.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we've talked about this quite often. And one of the patterns that we see develop is we see a tremendous amount of enthusiasm. And then as people begin to internalize what this could mean for them, we see a retreat of sorts. So we see a leap ahead and then, oh, that's going to make me have to change. And then they kind of start to wrap their head around what that change could look like. And they get really excited about it and start to leap ahead. And then something gets triggered and thinks, this is going to prompt me to change the practice that I have. And so I think one of the challenges that we've encountered is how do you mitigate that pendulum swing back and forth to maintain a larger collective momentum towards the outcome that we're trying to achieve. And so there's a lot of research around educational change. And so the pattern that we're seeing is not surprising. But I think one of the challenges for us as researchers is how do we share that information with those people that are implementing NEXTschool so they know how to anticipate and respond to some of what's happening. And so I think that's an ongoing challenge, but one that requires some really good, solid relationships between certainly the research team, the school implementing team, and the community-based team, so that everybody's on the same page and can see what's happening. And know how then to respond to it. Because it's one thing to point out, okay, just so you know, here's an obstacle or here's a question or a challenge that you can anticipate. But anticipating it is only half the battle. What do we do when we see it? And so I think that's one of the real commitments that we've made in the project, is to be able to document those types of things to help people navigate what can be a fairly complex process.
I would say the biggest challenge is letting go, and I mean that at all those levels. For myself as the designer of the model and at the beginning, letting go to have other people involved in the design process and the development process. It's difficult for teachers to let go of the structures that they become comfortable with, even though they don't no longer feel the same level of value for them, but they're comfortable, they're routine. Yeah, it's what everybody expects. Letting go of that security. Administrators letting go. When you empower teachers, you shift the power out of the front office into the classroom. And that's a difficult transition. I'll leave that for Felicia if she wants to tackle that. But I think letting go is the big issue. Lisa talks about change management theory and practice, and it's not people's fear of where they're going that is the major obstacle. It's fear of leaving comfort behind. So yeah, I think letting go is the biggest challenge of all. And wonderfully, as I said in my earlier remarks about the PED Day that we had in November, when we let go and let the teachers really get into it, all hell didn't break loose. In fact, exciting, terrific ideas came to the front, things that were in the back of people's mind and never had the occasion, or rarely had the occasion, to express ideas about how to be creative and how to be better at at the teaching learning experience. So yeah, letting go is an exciting adventure. It has its obstacles, but the outcomes have far outweighed the obstacles, but still a challenge.
Felicia, would you like to share anything? No pressure. Or Sandy?
I think Lisa and Noel said, both of them said very interesting things, but I think they've hit the nail on the head. There is this ebb and flow that is happening in everything. So, you know, Lisa and Vanessa keep reminding me about the, you know, the cycle, and so that's helped certainly me understand what I'm observing as an administrator, but also that notion of, yes, Noel speaks to the administration, for example. I'll speak to that, you know, letting go and allowing the teachers to have more say, more, you know, and frankly, again, cognitively, of course they should. They're the ones who have to deliver the product. They're the ones on the front line, boots on the ground, that whole expression, 100%. But that's not, we're not really comfortable. I mean, even the teachers aren't really comfortable with that, because then when they hit a roadblock, they run back to the admin and now want the admin to solve, in certain cases, the situation. So we're navigating all of that, and I think both of them have. So that's why I love that notion of, we all have to remember to let go, and if we can let go of some of our comfort, which teachers are so good at. Please read sarcasm into that. You know, we hate change. We love our comfort. We love what we know. It's why many of us went into teaching, because we knew that the classroom would look like it did 150 years ago. That's difficult, but we know that there's value in doing it. Again, on a cognitive level, we have to get out of our heads, you know, we have to get out of our hearts and our emotions. But yeah, but it's not an easy road. And so I think, you know, Lisa referring to the people are on board and then they retreat, and then people are on board and then they retreat. And what does that look like? And how do you navigate that? And how do you acknowledge that that's okay and normal? And again, those individuals have helped me understand it, recognize it, and go, oh, don't freak out. This is normal and this is okay. That's been a really interesting aspect of this whole process. So thanks.
I think Felicia's absolutely right. As a teacher, you're going back and forth and you're like, hey, this is so cool. I'm so excited. But then you take a step back and you're like, oh my God, I have to let go. Because you're going more into like that student-centered world, right? And you're changing the paradigm.
And negotiating with team members, right, Sandy? So you don't always, you know, a teacher who's always been able to do whatever they wanted in their classroom, shut the door, and I get to dictate how this looks. And now I have to negotiate with them and they don't agree. And why do I, you know, so that's another dynamic too. You know, as you increase collaboration and teamwork, you're also letting go too. You don't always get your way, right? Obviously you won't always win. So that's for 100%, sure.
100%. And then also when it came to like the scheduling and discussing with admin, at a couple of points, I remember, I think I walked into one of our meetings and I was like, yeah, but shouldn't admin be telling me this? So that too, letting go, where I was like, no, it's not. Exactly. I'm like, that's not my call. That's my administrator's call to tell me. So yeah, the back and forth.
You made me think too of teachers negotiating with students, right? When we put up flex time and students have choice about academic and interest courses, it means that the teacher is not, you know, the director, I was going to say dictator, but I shouldn't, the director of everything that goes on in the classroom. Suddenly you're asking students to make choices about courses and sometimes telling them, well, you're falling behind in mathematics, so maybe you want to park the interest course for a while, and for the next cycle of student flex you're going to do some tutorials. That is very foreign to most of the structure of particularly high school, which is trying to create balance and structure in a building full of 868 people plus teachers. So yeah, negotiating not only among peers, but with students as well. That's going
to be a little challenge.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Noel, because we have a comment here in the chat from John Fulton, who's mentioning that the thought about letting go can be challenging, especially for students. And I think we forget sometimes that this idea of giving students choice and more freedom is a really important idea, but it has to be scaffolded. It has to be something that they have support with, just like how teachers need the similar support. So yeah, it's all at each level, this type of letting go. It's a great way to frame this challenge. So we have just one, sorry, go ahead.
Just for a moment, we had to pull back on that, right? Because when we started talking about interest courses in the design sessions with the teachers, it was like, you know, oh, wow, we could just do sports and extracurricular activities started to tumble into the daily schedule. And that's when we said, well, wait a minute, the interest courses still have to connect with cross-curricular competencies and lifelong learning components of the program. And that helped us, you know, in that same push and pull to pull back in and say, whoa, it's not, you know, it's not a free-for-all, because if we give too much choice of just pure interest, it's difficult then for you to pull back and ensure that academic goals are being achieved as well.
And also, Noel, whose interest is the course for? The teacher's interest or the student's interest? That was another thing we had to talk about. We had teachers really excited to share one of their passions, you know, but do any of the kids care about what you care about, you know? And that was a conversation we had to have too. Who gets to drive the interest courses? Again, cognitively, we all know, well, it's logical, it should be the kids, but that wasn't our instinct at all, right, Sandy? I mean, the instinct was from the teaching staff, well, I want to teach, I'm excited to teach this, I'm excited to share this with kids. So a step back was needed to say, well, wait a second, maybe we need to ask the kids, what do you guys want to learn about? So that was, again, checks and balances, as Lisa keeps pointing out, Vanessa too keeps telling me, back and forth, you know, so yeah.
So we're out of questions and almost out of time. So I just wanted to share one last question comment in the chat from Rosemary Murphy. She says, I wish I had this when I attended high school. And I think I feel the same way. I really, especially hearing from Sandy and Felicia today, it's really exciting to hear what's happening in Billings. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this project unfolds. We'll pass it back to Anita to close the event for today.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Aron, and all. Thank you to the participants, to the panelists. Incredibly stimulating. And I too wish I would have had the opportunity to possibly attend a school that would be implementing this sort of initiative. Wonderful work. So it's the end. So thank you again for attending today's event. We always want to hear your feedback, and we invite you to fill out the evaluation form for today's NEXTschool webinar. You will find the link in the chat. And stay tuned for our upcoming ILET events. The best way to learn about what is coming up in our programming is to sign up for our newsletter if you haven't already, or follow us on Facebook. And you'll see the links as well. So in closing, I would like to acknowledge that this event was made possible through the financial support of the Department of Canadian Heritage. And I would also like to thank my colleague, Anna Hunt, for her technical assistance, as well as our Zoom tech manager, Alexandra Hayden. And thank you again for being here. And we wish you all a great day and see you the next time.